The wind shrieked like something dying as Seren Lockwood stumbled through the darkness, rain slashing against her face with the force of thrown stones. Her cloak had given up any pretense of keeping her dry hours ago. Her boots squelched with every step, heavy with mud that threatened to pull them from her feet entirely. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a world gone mad with water and wind. And for one terrible moment, she saw nothing but endless moor in every direction. No road, no shelter, no hope. The driver had abandoned her at the crossroads when the storm first broke, shouting something about his horses and his own skin. He'd tossed her valise into the mud and whipped the carriage away before she could even protest. That was 2 hours ago, or 3. Time had lost meaning in the howling darkness. Another flash of lightning. And there, finally, lights. Warm, golden windows glowing through the tempest, like beacons calling a ship to shore. The neighboring estate, it had to be. Thornbury Manor, where Miss Seren Lockwood was expected to begin her position as governess to Lady Pemberton's 3 daughters. She was late, soaked, ruined, but alive if she could just reach those lights. Serene forced her legs to move faster, though every muscle screamed in protest. The path beneath her feet became gravel, then stone. The lights grew larger. The shape of the house emerged from the rain, and something in her exhausted mind registered that it seemed larger than the modest manor house described in Lady Pemberton's letters. Much larger. But she was past caring. The door was massive, dark oak with iron fixtures that gleamed wetly in the stormlight. Seren raised a hand that shook with cold and exhaustion and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder, the sound swallowed by thunder. Still nothing. Desperation clawed at her chest. She was going to die here, on this doorstep, because no one could hear her over the storm's fury. She would freeze or collapse, or simply dissolve into the rain like she'd never existed at all. She raised her fist one more time, and the door swung open. The man standing in the doorway was not a butler. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a white shirt and dark trousers that suggested he'd been in the middle of something when he'd heard her knocking. Dark hair fell across a forehead furrowed with irritation. His eyes were pale, gray or perhaps blue, and they assessed her with the warmth of winter ice. "What the devil," he said, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "Are you doing on my doorstep?" Seren opened her mouth to explain, to apologize, to beg for shelter until the storm passed. But her body had other plans. The world tilted sideways, her legs buckled beneath her, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was those cold eyes widening in surprise as he lunged forward to catch her. She woke to warmth. That was wrong. She should be cold. She should be dead, frozen on some stranger's doorstep. Instead, she was warm, wrapped in something soft, lying on something softer still. The air smelled of wood smoke and lavender, and something else, something masculine, cedar and sandalwood. Serene's eyes flew open. She was in a bed, a massive 4-poster bed with burgundy hangings and more pillows than she'd ever seen in one place. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth across the room. Candles flickered on a writing desk, a vanity, a small table beside the bed. And sitting in a chair by the fire, watching her with those unsettling pale eyes, was the man from the doorway. "You're awake." His voice held no relief, no warmth, simple observation. "I was beginning to think you'd chosen my entrance hall as your final resting place." Seren struggled to sit up, then realized with dawning horror that she was no longer wearing her soaked traveling dress. She was in a nightgown. Someone had undressed her. Her face must have shown her alarm because the man raised one dark eyebrow. "My housekeeper attended to you. I assure you, whatever virtue you possess remains intact." "Where?" Serene's voice came out as a croak. She swallowed and tried again. Where am I? Windmere Hall. The name meant nothing to her. I was trying to reach Thornbury Manor. Lady Pemberton is expecting me. Something flickered across his face. Thornbury is 4 miles east of here. You came in entirely the wrong direction. 4 miles. In this storm, it might as well have been 400. I have to. Serene pushed back the covers, trying to rise, but the room spun dangerously. Lady Pemberton will think I've abandoned the position. She'll hire someone else. I need to. You need to lie down before you collapse again. He hadn't moved from his chair, but his voice carried an authority that made her pause. The storm won't break until morning at the earliest. The roads are rivers of mud. Even if I wanted to send you away, which I'm increasingly tempted to do, it would be impossible. I can't stay here. You have no choice. They stared at each other across the firelit room, this strange cold man, and the drowned stranger who'd appeared on his doorstep. Seren was acutely aware of how she must look, hair tangled and wild, borrowed nightgown pooling around her too thin frame, eyes probably red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Who are you?" she asked. Before he could answer, the door burst open. "Corvin, is she awake?" "Oh, wonderful, she is." A young woman swept into the room like a summer breeze, all golden curls and bright eyes and rustling silk. She couldn't have been more than 19. With a heart-shaped face that radiated warmth, she grabbed both of Seren's hands before anyone could make introductions. "You poor dear thing. Nell said you nearly drowned on our doorstep. I'm Sabine. This brooding creature is my brother. Don't let him frighten you. He frightens everyone, but he's mostly harmless." "Sabine," the man said warningly. "Oh, hush. She needs kindness, not your scowling." Sabine perched on the edge of the bed, taking Seren's hands in hers. "Your hands are like ice still." "Corvin, did you not think to have someone bring her tea?" "I thought," he said icily, "to let her rest rather than subject her to interrogation." "It's not interrogation. It's hospitality. There's a difference." Sabine squeezed Seren's hands. "What's your name? Where were you going? How did you end up lost in that terrible storm?" "Sabine? I'm Seren." It came out before she could think better of it. "Seren Lockwood. I was traveling to Thornbury Manor to take a position as governess. My driver abandoned me when the storm broke, and I walked until I saw lights. I thought—" She trailed off, embarrassment heating her face. "I thought this was Thornbury." Sabine's expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing. That dreadful storm. And that terrible driver. Corvin, we must do something about these cowardly drivers who abandon young women on the moors. I'll add it to my list of urgent concerns." His sarcasm seemed to roll off Sabine entirely. "Well, you must stay here until the storm passes. We'll send word to Lady Pemberton in the morning. Explain everything. I'm sure she'll understand. I couldn't possibly impose." "Nonsense. We have dozens of empty rooms. One more guest is nothing." Sabine glanced at her brother. "Isn't that right, Corvin?" The man, Corvin, looked like he wanted to argue. His jaw tightened. His pale eyes flickered between Seren and his sister with barely concealed irritation. But before he could speak, another voice cut through the room. "What is this?" A woman stood in the doorway. She was perhaps 50, handsome rather than beautiful, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back severely from a face that could have been carved from marble. She wore black silk that rustled with disapproval, and her eyes, the same pale shade as Corvin's, swept over Seren with the assessment of someone cataloging flaws. "Grandmother." Sabine rose, her cheerfulness dimming slightly. "This is Miss Lockwood. She was caught in the storm and found her way to our door. We're giving her shelter for the night." Are we indeed? The woman moved into the room, her gaze never leaving Seren. And who is Miss Lockwood exactly? Where does she come from? Who are her people? I'm no one of consequence, your ladyship. Seren forced herself to meet those cold eyes. My father was a merchant. I'm traveling to take a position as governess at Thornbury Manor. A governess? The word dripped with disdain. And you simply wandered to our door. How convenient. Grandmother, Corvin said quietly. She collapsed in the entrance hall. She was half dead with cold. Many young women would be willing to appear half dead if it gained them entry to a duke's household. The word hit Seren like a physical blow. Duke. She was in a duke's house, in his bed, wearing borrowed clothes, being interrogated by what could only be a dowager duchess. I assure you, your ladyship, I had no idea whose house this was. I saw lights through the storm and walked toward them. That's all. That's all. The dowager's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. And yet here you are, in my grandson's private wing, creating exactly the sort of situation that leads to forced marriages and ruined reputations. Grandmother, Sabine looked horrified. It's true. Melisande saw everything. The Duke carrying an unconscious woman in his arms, bringing her to his chambers. The gossip is already spreading through the house. Seren's stomach dropped. His chambers? Corvin's expression had gone carefully blank. The guest rooms in this wing were closest to the entrance hall. I made a practical decision. A practical decision that has now been witnessed by half of London, since we're hosting Lady Melisande and her mother until the storm passes. The dowager's voice was brittle. Lady Melisande, aunt whom you were specifically meant to be courting this week. Lady Melisande, who is undoubtedly composing letters to all her friends at this very moment, describing the mysterious woman the Duke of Windermere carried to his bed. I didn't carry her to my bed. I carried her to a guest room that happens to be in this wing. Do you think that distinction will matter to the gossips? The dowager turned back to Seren, her assessment somehow even more cutting than before. Well, Miss Lockwood, it seems you've placed us all in a rather interesting position. Seren wanted to disappear, wanted the bed to swallow her whole. She'd stumbled into something far more complicated than shelter from a storm, and every instinct screamed that she needed to leave immediately. I'll go. She pushed back the covers again. As soon as the storm breaks, I'll leave. I'll walk to Thornbury if I have to. I have no intention of causing trouble for anyone. Walking won't solve this. Corvin's voice was quiet but firm. My grandmother is right about one thing. Lady Melisande saw me carry you inside. By morning, there will be speculation about who you are and why you're here. If you simply vanish, the speculation will only grow worse. Then what do you suggest? He was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled. The wind howled against the windows. And something shifted in his expression, a calculation replacing the irritation. I suggest, he said slowly, that we control the narrative. What does that mean? It means, Miss Lockwood, that you're not going to be a drowned governess who stumbled to the wrong door. He stood, and Seren became suddenly aware of how tall he was, and how much space he commanded simply by existing. You're going to be exactly who I need you to be. And who is that? Corvin looked at his grandmother, whose eyes had narrowed with suspicion. He looked at Sabine, whose face was alight with curiosity. Then he looked back at Seren, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. My intended. The room exploded into chaos. The dowager's protests cut through Sabine's delighted exclamations. Questions flew like arrows, but Seren heard none of it. She was staring at the Duke of Windermere, this cold, controlled stranger who had just proposed the most insane arrangement she'd ever heard, and she had no idea how to answer. Have you lost your mind? The dowager's voice could have frozen the fire in its hearth. She's a governess, a nobody. Why, you cannot possibly expect anyone to believe you've chosen to court her. I don't expect them to believe anything. Corvin's calm was infuriating. I expect them to wonder, to speculate, to be so focused on the mystery of Miss Lockwood that they forget to push Lady Melisande at me at every opportunity. This is about avoiding Melisande? The dowager's laugh was sharp. You would invent a fictional engagement simply to escape a suitable match? There is nothing suitable about Lady Melisande, and you know it. Something dark flickered across Corvin's face. She's calculating, cold, and interested only in my title. I will not marry her grandmother. Not now. Not ever. Then choose someone else. Someone real. Someone appropriate. I choose Miss Lockwood. Serene found her voice at last. I haven't agreed to anything. All eyes turned to her. She was still sitting in the massive bed, still wearing a borrowed nightgown, still looking like something the storm had dragged in. But she forced herself to sit straighter, to meet their gazes directly. You're discussing my fate as if I'm not present, as if I have no say in whether I become part of whatever scheme you're plotting. Her voice steadied as she spoke. I came here seeking shelter from a storm, not entanglement in aristocratic politics. I have a position waiting for me at Thornbury Manor, a respectable position. I won't jeopardize that for a scheme I don't understand. Corvin studied her with something that might have been respect. What would it take to gain your cooperation? Nothing. I don't want to cooperate. I want to leave, find Lady Pemberton, and begin the life I actually planned for myself. And if Lady Pemberton has already heard rumors about the woman the Duke of Windermere carried to his chambers? Corvin's voice was soft, but pointed. Do you think she'll hire a governess with that kind of scandal attached to her name? The truth of his words landed like a blow. Serene's stomach twisted. He was right. Even innocent association with scandal could destroy a woman's prospects, especially a woman who depended on her reputation for employment. That's not fair. No, it isn't. He moved closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. But it's reality. The gossip has already begun. Lady Melisande will ensure it spreads. Your choices now are limited, Miss Lockwood. You can flee back to Thornbury and hope Lady Pemberton is more open-minded than most, or you can remain here under my protection while we craft a story that leaves your reputation intact. What story could possibly accomplish that? Sabine bounced on her feet, unable to contain her enthusiasm. Oh, it's brilliant, actually. If Corvin presents you as someone he's been secretly corresponding with, someone he invited here to meet the family, then your presence becomes romantic instead of scandalous. But that's a lie. A useful lie. Corvin's gaze held hers. One that protects us both. Both. You from ruined prospects, I from my grandmother's relentless campaign to see me married to Lady Melisande. The dowager made a sound of disgust. This is madness. She has no breeding, no connections, and no fortune. Even pretending to court her will damage your standing. My standing can survive a brief entanglement with a charming mystery. Corvin's smile didn't reach his eyes. What it cannot survive is another year of Melisandre's machinations and your endless pressure to make a match I find intolerable. Serene watched the battle of wills between grandmother and grandson, understanding slowly dawning. This wasn't about her at all. She was a pawn, a convenient tool in a larger game she couldn't fully see. She should be offended. She was offended. And yet, some small practical part of her brain was calculating possibilities. If she fled to Thornbury now, with gossip already swirling, she would likely lose the position. She'd be stranded, penniless, with no references and a scandal attached to her name. If she stayed, played this strange game, she might emerge with something better. connections, references from a duke's household. A story that painted her as desirable rather than desperate. It was manipulation. It was madness. And it might be her only option. "How long?" she asked. Corvin's expression sharpened with interest. "How long would what take? This pretense, how long would I need to maintain it? The house party ends in a fortnight. After that, we could stage a graceful parting, a mutual decision that things wouldn't suit. No scandal, no harm, and you leave with letters of recommendation that would open any door in England. Letters of recommendation from a duke, and from my sister, from the household staff, from anyone you like." He stepped closer still, and Saren caught again that scent of cedar and sandalwood. "I'm offering you an opportunity, Miss Lockwood, a chance to transform disaster into advantage. All you have to do is play a role for 2 weeks. And in return, you avoid marrying Lady Melisande. Among other things." There was something in his voice, some shadow beneath the words. He wasn't telling her everything. But then, she wasn't telling him everything either. "I need time to think." "You have until morning." He turned toward the door. "I'll send Nell with tea and something to eat. The storm should continue through the night, so you needn't worry about running off into the darkness. Get some sleep, Miss Lockwood. Tomorrow will require all your strength." He left without waiting for a response. The dowager followed with one final withering glance. Only Sabine remained, hovering by the bedside with barely contained excitement. "You're going to say yes, aren't you? Please say yes. It's been so dreadfully dull here, and Corvin's been like a storm cloud for months, and this is the most interesting thing that's happened since—" She stopped abruptly, something painful crossing her face. "Since what?" Saren asked gently. "Since our father died." Sabine's brightness dimmed. 6 months ago. Corvin hasn't been the same. He runs the estate, attends Parliament, and does everything a duke should do. But he's not really here. He's somewhere else, somewhere I can't reach." Saren thought of her own father, who had retreated into silence after his business collapsed. Different circumstances, same result. A man present in body, but absent in spirit. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Sabine managed a small smile. "I shouldn't be telling you this. We've only just met. But something about you seems trustworthy. Like you understand loss." "I do." Sabine reached out and squeezed her hand. "Say yes tomorrow. Not for Corvin's sake. Not for mine. For yours. Whatever brought you to that governess position, whatever made you travel alone in a storm, you deserve better than that. This could be your chance." After Sabine left, Saren sat in the massive bed, watching the fire burn low, thinking about chances and choices and the strange turns life could take. Nell arrived with tea and cold meat and cheese. A round-faced girl with kind eyes, she chattered cheerfully about the house, the storm, Lady Sabine's goodness, and the Duke's tragic brooding. Saren listened without really hearing, her mind spinning through possibilities. When she finally blew out the candles and settled into the pillows, the storm still raged against the windows. Somewhere in this vast house, a duke was planning to use her as a shield against an unwanted marriage. A dowager was plotting her removal. A mysterious Lady Melisande was spreading gossip that could destroy her. And tomorrow, Saren would have to choose. She fell asleep to the sound of thunder, dreaming of doors and storms and a pair of pale eyes that saw too much. When she woke, the decision had already made itself. Morning light filtered through heavy curtains, weak and gray, but unmistakably present. The storm had faded to steady rain, the wind's howl reduced to occasional gusts. Saren lay still for a moment, orienting herself. The burgundy hangings, the cold hearth, the borrowed nightgown. Not a dream, then. All of it real. She rose and found that Nell had laid out clothes sometime in the night. A morning dress of soft blue muslin, clearly too fine for a governess, but modest enough to be appropriate. Undergarments, stockings, even slippers that fit reasonably well. "Lady Sabine sent them, miss." Nell appeared in the doorway, already cheerful despite the early hour. "She said you're nearly her size and shouldn't have to face the day in wet traveling clothes." "That's very kind." "Lady Sabine is always kind." Nell helped her dress with practiced efficiency. "It's the Duke who's difficult. Though," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "he wasn't always. Before his grace passed, young Master Corvin used to laugh. Used to ride out at dawn just for the pleasure of it. Used to—" She stopped, catching herself. "Forgive me, miss. I talk too much." "There's nothing to forgive." Seren studied her reflection in the vanity mirror. The blue dress made her look almost refined, almost like she belonged here. "You loved the old Duke." "Everyone did." Nell's voice was soft. "He was a good man, and losing him broke something in this house, in the young Duke especially." Seren filed this information away, another piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to see. Breakfast was served in a sunny room despite the gray weather outside. Sabine was already there, radiant in yellow silk, pushing pastries across the table with enthusiastic recommendations. The Dowager was absent. And Corvin? Corvin sat at the head of the table, dressed immaculately in dark coat and cream waistcoat, looking like he hadn't slept at all. The shadows under his eyes only made them more striking, more unsettling in their pale intensity. "Miss Lockwood?" He rose briefly as she entered, a courtesy that felt almost mechanical. "I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected, given the circumstances." "The storm is breaking." He gestured to the window. "By afternoon, the road should be passable. If you've decided to leave, arrangements can be made. And if I've decided to stay..." Something flickered in his expression. Interest, perhaps, or surprise that she'd consider it. "Then we have much to discuss." Sabine clapped her hands in delight. "You're staying?" "Oh, this is wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. Didn't I tell you, Corvin? Didn't I say she'd be sensible?" "You said many things, most of them exhausting." "He's always like this before noon." Sabine waved dismissively. "Oh, it's best to ignore him until he's had enough coffee." Seren took a seat and allowed Sabine to pile her plate with food she wasn't sure she could eat. Her stomach churned with nerves. She'd made a decision in the night, but speaking it aloud felt different, more real, more irreversible. "Before I agree to anything," she said carefully, "I need to understand exactly what you're proposing. What role am I meant to play? What will be expected of me?" Corvin set down his coffee cup. "You will be introduced as Miss Seren Lockwood, a young lady of modest but respectable background, whom I met during my travels last summer. We've been corresponding privately for months. When you found yourself traveling near Windmere, I invited you to visit and meet my family. A romantic fiction, a practical one. And what happens during this visit? We'll be seen together at meals, during walks, at the evening entertainments my grandmother has planned. You'll need to appear as though we share a genuine connection, nothing improper, but enough to make the nature of my interest clear." "Clear to whom?" "To Lady Melisande, to my grandmother, to the other guests who will arrive once the roads are passable." His jaw tightened. "To anyone who might otherwise continue pressuring me toward an unwanted match." Seren considered this. "And Lady Melisande, she's the woman your grandmother wants you to marry?" "She's one of several candidates my grandmother has been parading before me for the past 6 months." Bitterness edged his voice. "But she's the most persistent, right, and the most dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Corvin and Sabine exchanged a glance, that communicated something Seren couldn't read. "Melisande is clever," Sabine said finally. "Clever and patient and utterly ruthless. She's been positioning herself as the obvious choice since before Father died. Now that Corvin is Duke, she's intensified her campaign. Why? If he doesn't want her, why persist? Because the Dukedom of Windmere is one of the oldest and wealthiest in England." Corvin's voice was flat. "Because marrying me would make her one of the most powerful women in society. Because my feelings are irrelevant to her calculations." "And your grandmother supports this match?" "My grandmother supports security. Legacy. The continuation of a title that stretches back 300 years. He looked toward the window, on his profile sharp against the gray light. "She doesn't care if I'm happy, only that I fulfill my duty." The words echoed something inside Seren, her own mother, working fingers to the bone to ensure her children survived. Her brother Phineas, chasing schemes and dreams that never materialized. Her father, retreating further into himself with each passing year. Duty and survival, and the weight of expectations that crushed everything soft and hopeful. "I have conditions," she said. Corvin's eyebrow rose. "Do you?" "3 of them. If you accept, I'll play your role. If not, I'll leave this afternoon." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. Or amusement. "Name them." "First, my family must be informed properly, not through gossip or rumor. I want a letter delivered to my mother, explaining that I've accepted a position as Lady Sabine's companion for the remainder of the season. Not the truth, but something respectable. Something that won't cause her worry." "Done." "Second, when this ends, I want references. Letters that will help me secure proper employment. Not just from you, but from Lady Sabine, from anyone in society whose word carries weight." Sabine nodded eagerly. "I'll write you the most glowing recommendation anyone's ever seen. You'll have your pick of positions." "And third?" Corvin asked. Seren met his eyes directly. "The moment you decide to pursue a real match, whether with Lady Melisande or anyone else, this ends immediately. I won't be used as a shield while you court someone behind my back. I won't be made a fool." The silence stretched between them. Sabine looked between them with wide eyes. Even the servants seemed to hold their breath. "You have my word." Corvin extended his hand across the table. "All 3 conditions. Do we have an agreement?" Seren looked at his hand, elegant and strong, belonging to a world entirely unlike her own. Then she looked at Sabine, practically vibrating with excitement. Finally, she looked at the gray rain beyond the window, at the road that led to Thornbury, and a life of obscurity. She took his hand. "We have an agreement." His grip was warm and firm, and when he released her, she felt the absence of that warmth like a loss. "Excellent." Corvin stood. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for our first public appearance. My grandmother has requested your presence in her sitting room at 10 o'clock sharp. I suggest you spend the next hour fortifying yourself." He left, and Seren stared after him. "Fortifying myself?" Sabine's smile was sympathetic. "Grandmother can be intense. She's going to test you, push you, try to find weaknesses. Whatever you do, don't back down. She respects strength, even when she doesn't like it." At precisely 10 o'clock, Seren found herself standing outside an ornate door in the east wing, her palms sweating and her heart racing. A maid had escorted her through a maze of hallways, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, under chandeliers that glittered even in the gray morning light. She knocked. "Enter." The Dowager Duchess of Windmere sat in a chair by the window, silhouetted against the rain-streaked glass. She didn't rise as Seren entered, didn't offer a greeting or a seat. Simply watched, with those pale eyes that missed nothing. "Close the door," Seren obeyed, then stood waiting. The room was elegantly appointed, filled with expensive furniture and fresh flowers that seemed wrong against the storm outside. Everything spoke of wealth, taste, power, things Seren would never have. "You've agreed to my grandson's scheme." "Yes, your ladyship." "Why?" The question was sharp, demanding. Seren had prepared for accusations, for threats, for dismissal, not for genuine inquiry. "Because my alternatives are limited." "Limited how?" "If I leave now, with gossip already spreading, I'll likely lose my position at Thornbury Manor. I'll return home with nothing. No employment, no references, no prospects." Serene kept her voice steady. "Your grandson offers me a chance to emerge from this situation with my reputation intact and my future secured. It would be foolish to refuse." The dowager's eyes narrowed. "You admit you're using him." "I admit we're using each other." Seren met her gaze directly. "He needs a shield against Lady Melisande. I need protection until I can establish myself elsewhere. It's a transaction, nothing more." "You're remarkably honest." "Would you prefer I lie?" Silence fell between them, sharp as breaking glass. The dowager studied her with an intensity that made Seren want to squirm, but she forced herself to remain still. "Sit," the dowager said finally, gesturing to a chair opposite hers. Seren sat. "Tell me about your family. Not the polished version, the truth." So Seren told her. About her father's failed shipping business, not destroyed by a partner's betrayal. About the years of slow decline, moving to smaller houses, selling possessions one by one. About her mother's quiet strength and her brother's endless schemes. About applying for the governess position, because it was the only door that opened. The dowager listened without interruption. When Seren finished, silence hung in the air like smoke. "You're poor," the dowager said flatly. "Respectable poverty, but poverty nonetheless. No connections, no fortune, no prospects beyond domestic service." "Yes, your ladyship. And yet my grandson has decided to present you as a potential match." The dowager's voice dripped with skepticism. "A governess playing duchess." "I'm not playing duchess. I'm playing a young woman your grandson is courting. There's a difference." "Is there?" The dowager leaned forward. "Let me tell you what will happen, Miss Lockwood. You'll spend the next fortnight wearing beautiful gowns and eating fine food and pretending you belong in a world that will never accept you. My grandson will be attentive, charming even, because he's very good at performing when he chooses to be. And you'll start to forget this is a performance. You'll start to hope. I won't. Everyone does. It's human nature." The dowager rose, moving to the window. "My concern is not for you, girl. You'll survive. You're clever and adaptable. My concern is for Corvin." That was not what Seren expected. "Your Grace?" "My son died 6 months ago." The dowager's voice held no emotion, but her knuckles were white where they gripped the window frame. "A sudden illness. Corvin was in London on parliamentary business. No, he didn't make it back in time to say goodbye. He's been somewhere else ever since, performing his duties, managing the estates, attending Parliament. But not here. Not really here." Seren didn't know what to say. "I want him to marry," the dowager continued. "Not because it's his duty, though it is. Not because he needs an heir, though he does. I want him to marry because I want him to live again, to feel something beyond duty and grief. Lady Melisande is suitable, yes, but she's also vapid and self-absorbed. She'd bore him within a month. Then why push the match? Because he won't choose for himself. He'll bury himself in account books and estate improvements until he's 40 and alone, and then wonder why life feels empty. The dowager turned, her gaze sharp. You, Miss Lockwood, are a disruption, an unknown variable. You might bore him just as thoroughly as Lady Melisande would, or you might surprise me. Seren stood, meeting the older woman's eyes. I'm not trying to trap your grandson into marriage, Your Grace. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. We'll see. The dowager moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you hurt him, if you manipulate him, or try to exploit his grief, I will destroy you. I don't care how sympathetic your circumstances are. Do we understand each other? Perfectly, Your Grace. The dowager nodded and swept from the room, leaving Seren alone with her racing heart and the unsettling realization that she'd just been given both a warning and a benediction. She was still standing there trying to process the conversation when Sabine burst in. She likes you. Sabine grabbed her hands, spinning her in an excited circle. I can tell. She only threatens people she respects. This is perfect. Seren wasn't sure perfect was the right word, but she let Sabine pull her toward the door, chattering about dress fittings and afternoon calls. Behind them, through the window, she could see Corvin in the garden. He stood very still, hands clasped behind his back, staring at nothing. Performing his duties, the dowager had said. But not really here. Seren wondered suddenly what it would take to make him present, to crack through that controlled facade and find the man underneath. Then she pushed the thought away. This was temporary, a performance, nothing more. She repeated it like a prayer as Sabine dragged her toward the waiting carriage. Nothing more. The dressing room was larger than the entire upper floor of Seren's family home. Mirrors covered 3 walls, reflecting endless versions of herself, back in dizzying multiplication. Wardrobes lined the 4th wall, their doors thrown open to reveal cascades of silk and satin and velvet in every color imaginable. These were our mothers, Sabine explained, running her fingers along a row of gowns with reverent tenderness. Father kept everything. He couldn't bear to part with them. After he died, grandmother wanted them donated or sold, but Corvin refused. They're beautiful. They're yours, for the fortnight at least. Sabine pulled out a gown of deep emerald silk that shimmered like water in candlelight. This one for the welcome dinner tomorrow. The color will make your eyes extraordinary. Seren touched the fabric, softer than anything she'd ever worn. I can't possibly. You can, and you will. Sabine's tone brooked no argument. If you're going to convince anyone that my brother is courting you, you need to look the part. Lady Melisande will arrive dripping in diamonds and the latest Paris fashions. You need to hold your own. Hold my own against diamonds? Against everything she represents. Sabine's expression grew serious. Melisande isn't just wealthy, Seren. She's cunning. She's been maneuvering toward Corvin for years, cultivating connections, collecting secrets, positioning herself as the obvious choice. When she sees you, she'll assess every weakness, every vulnerability, and every possible angle of attack. You make her sound like a general preparing for war. That's exactly what she is. Sabine pulled out another gown, to this one a soft rose that caught the light like dawn. For the garden party. And this, she extracted a striking midnight blue. For the final ball. You'll need morning dresses, afternoon dresses, riding habits. Riding habits? I don't ride. Then we'll teach you. Sabine grinned. Corvin's an excellent horseman. Perhaps some private lessons are in order. The suggestion hung in the air, loaded with implications Seren pretended not to notice. The next hours passed in a blur of fabric and fitting. A seamstress appeared, summoned from the village with promises of generous payment. She measured and pinned and tutted over Seren's modest figure, declaring that good bones made up for lack of curves. Sabine chattered throughout, a constant stream of information about the guests who would arrive, the events planned, the politics Seren would need to navigate. Lord and Lady Ashworth, harmless. He collects butterflies. She collects gossip, but never uses it maliciously. The Hartley twins. 17, giggling, obsessed with romance novels. They'll adore you the moment they hear you're being courted by a duke. Anyone I should avoid? Sabine's brightness flickered. Lord Vance. He's Melisandre's cousin. Charming on the surface, but something cold underneath. He watches people too closely. Remembers too much. And Lady Melisandre herself? Don't avoid her. That would look like fear. Sabine handed her a pair of silk gloves to try. Engage with her. Be polite, but not deferential. Let her see you're not intimidated. Even if I am. Especially then. Sabine squeezed her hand. Fear is only fatal if you show it. By late afternoon, Saren's head swam with names and faces and rules she'd never imagined existed. Which fork for which course. When to speak and when to listen. How to accept a compliment without seeming proud. How to deflect an insult without seeming weak. It's exhausting, she admitted, collapsing into a chair in Sabine's private sitting room. How do you manage it every day? Practice, and the knowledge that most of them are just as terrified as you are. Sabine poured tea with practiced grace. Society runs on performance, everyone pretending to be more confident, wealthier, happier than they actually are. The secret is realizing you're not the only fraud in the room. That's oddly comforting. Isn't it? Sabine smiled. Now, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Corvin. Serene's stomach tightened. Oh, what about him? You'll need to seem comfortable with him, familiar, like you've been exchanging letters for months and finally meeting in person. Sabine set down the teapot. That means knowing things about him. Small details that would come up in correspondence. Such as? His favorite book is Aristotle's Ethics. He reads it when he can't sleep, which is often. He takes his coffee black with no sugar. He has a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident involving a hunting knife. He hates dancing, but does it well, because father insisted on lessons. Seren absorbed this information, each detail adding dimension to the cold stranger who'd caught her when she collapsed. What else? He loved our mother, though he barely remembers her. He blames himself for father's death, though it was a fever that took him, saw nothing anyone could prevent. He hasn't laughed, truly laughed, since the funeral. That's not something that would come up in letters. No. Sabine's voice softened. But it's something you should know anyway. My brother is not cold, Seren. He's wounded. There's a difference. Before Seren could respond, a knock interrupted them. A footman entered with a small wrapped package. For Miss Lockwood, from His Grace. Sabine's eyebrows rose as Seren took the package. It was light, rectangular, wrapped in brown paper with no note attached. Open it, Sabine urged. Seren unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a small leather journal, its cover worn soft with age. She opened to the first page and found an inscription in faded ink. To my son Corvin on his 16th birthday. May these pages hold your thoughts as I have held your heart. On ever your loving father. Her breath caught. This is his journal, or rather, the journal father gave him. Sabine looked equally surprised. He's never shown it to anyone, not even me. Beneath the inscription, in fresher ink, Corvin had written a note. Miss Lockwood, these are the thoughts I've never shared. If you're to play the role of someone who knows me, perhaps you should actually know me. Read at your discretion. Burn, if you prefer. Seren stared at the words, her her chest tight with something she couldn't name. This was not the gesture of a cold, calculating man using her as a convenient shield. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. "He trusts you," Sabine whispered. "I don't think he even realizes how much." Seren closed the journal carefully, tucking it into her pocket. She would read it later, in private, when she could process whatever she might find. But already, something had shifted. Already, she was beginning to see past the ice to whatever burned beneath. The guests arrived in a parade of carriages that churned the gravel drive into chaos. Seren watched from her window as lords and ladies emerged, their voices carrying up through the gray afternoon like the chatter of exotic birds. And then, in a carriage of polished black drawn by matched white horses, Lady Melisande Vance made her entrance. She was beautiful. That was the first thing Seren noticed, and the most devastating. Golden hair coiled elaborately beneath a hat trimmed with peacock feathers. Porcelain skin unmarked by sun or worry. A traveling costume of deep violet that probably cost more than Serene's family earned in a year. She moved across the courtyard with the confidence of a woman who had never doubted her place in the world. Behind her followed a tall man with the same golden coloring, his smile sharp as a blade. Lord Vance, the cousin Sabine had warned her about. "Don't let her intimidate you," Sabine said from behind her. "Beauty fades. Character doesn't." "Easy to say when you're beautiful yourself," Sabine laughed. "Come, time to dress. The welcome dinner begins in 2 hours, and you need to be ready." The emerald gown fit perfectly, the seamstress's hasty alterations invisible to anyone who didn't know to look. Nell arranged Seren's dark hair in an elaborate style, weaving through it a ribbon of gold that matched the embroidery at her hem. Small emerald earrings, borrowed from Sabine, completed the transformation. Seren barely recognized herself. "I'm stunning," Sabine declared. "Absolutely stunning. Melisande will choke on her soup." Is that the goal? It's certainly a bonus. They descended the grand staircase together, Sabine's hand steady on Seren's arm. The entrance hall had been transformed with flowers and candles, their light casting warm shadows across marble floors. Guests clustered in groups, their conversation a low murmur of anticipation. And there, at the center of it all, stood Corvin. He was devastating in formal evening wear, the dark fabric making his pale eyes seem almost silver. He stood with the Ashworths, his expression politely attentive, but when he saw Seren on the stairs, something flickered across his face. He excused himself and crossed to meet them. "Miss Lockwood?" His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes traveled from her hair to her hem and back again. "You look appropriate," she offered, remembering his terrible compliment from the first morning. His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Exceptional." Sabine made a small sound of approval. "Much better. I told you he could manage compliments when properly motivated." "Sabine," Corvin warned. I know. Behave myself." She released Seren's arm. "I'll leave you two to your performance. The Hartley twins are waving at me. Try not to scandalize anyone before dinner." She swept away, leaving Seren alone with Corvin in the crowded hall. He offered his arm with formal precision. "Shall we?" She took it, hyper-aware of the warmth of him through his sleeve, the solid strength beneath the fine fabric. "Your journal," she murmured as they walked. "Oh, I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing. It was merely practical." "Was it?" He didn't answer, guiding her instead toward a cluster of guests who watched their approach with undisguised curiosity. "Lord Ashworth, Lady Ashworth. May I present Miss Seren Lockwood, a dear friend who has honored us with her company this fortnight." The introductions blurred together. Names and faces and polite exchanges that Seren navigated with careful attention to everything Sabine had taught her. She answered questions about her family with vague honesty, about her friendship with Corvin with practiced fiction. And all the while she felt eyes upon her. Lady Melisande watched from across the hall, her smile fixed, her gaze calculating. Lord Vance stood beside her, his attention equally focused, but somehow more unsettling. She's assessing you," Corvin murmured during a brief lull. "Trying to determine if you're a threat." "Am I? That depends entirely on how well you perform tonight." The dinner gong sounded, and guests began moving toward the dining room. Corvin offered his arm again, but before Seren could take it, a voice cut through the crowd. "Your Grace, how wonderful to see you." Lady Melisande glided toward them, violet silk rustling with each step. Up close, she was even more beautiful, her features perfect as a painted portrait. Her smile revealed teeth white as pearls. "Lady Melisande," Corvin's tone cooled several degrees. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Tedious, but necessary." Her eyes slid to Seren. "And this must be the mysterious Miss Lockwood everyone is whispering about, the woman who arrived so dramatically during the storm. I'm afraid the drama was entirely unintentional. Wasn't it?" Melisande's smile sharpened. "How fortunate that the Duke was present to rescue you. He does love playing the hero." "I wasn't aware playing was involved." "Oh, everything with His Grace is a performance." Melisande linked her arm through Corvin's free arm, ignoring his subtle stiffening. "We've known each other since childhood, haven't we, Corvin? I probably know him better than anyone. I'm sure Miss Lockwood appreciates the context. I appreciate many things." Seren kept her voice pleasant. "Including your ladyship's kind welcome. Your gown is extraordinary. Paris, I assume." "Naturally." Melisande preened. "I couldn't possibly wear anything less." "Of course not. Quality is so difficult to find these days." Something flickered in Melisande's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, that the governess had claws. "Indeed." Melisande released Corvin's arm. "I look forward to becoming better acquainted, Miss Lockwood. I'm sure you have such interesting stories to share." She swept toward the dining room, Lord Vance falling into step beside her. "Well done," Corvin murmured. She wasn't expecting resistance. She wasn't expecting much of anything from a governess. "Which gives you an advantage," he guided her into the dining room. "Never let her see you coming." Dinner was an elaborate affair of 7 courses and constant conversation. Seren was seated between Lord Ashworth, who talked extensively about butterfly migration patterns, and one of the Hartley twins, who peppered her with questions about how she'd met the Duke. Was it terribly romantic? The girl's eyes were wide. Did you know immediately that he was special? Seren thought of collapsing in a stranger's entrance hall, of waking in an unfamiliar bed, of cold eyes and calculated bargains. "It was unexpected," she said honestly. "But yes, I knew immediately he was unlike anyone I'd ever met." Across the table, Corvin caught her eye. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement that she'd spoken true even while lying. After dinner, the party moved to the music room for entertainment. Lady Ashworth played competently. One of the Hartley twins sang sweetly, and then Lord Vance suggested dancing. "Surely His Grace will lead the first set," he said, his smile too sharp. "With his dear friend, Miss Lockwood." It was a trap, and Seren could feel it, though she couldn't see its shape. Corvin clearly felt it too, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said smoothly, "if Miss Lockwood is willing." She took his hand, because refusing would look like fear. The music began, a waltz. Corvin moved with the grace Sabine had described, leading her through steps she barely remembered from hurried lessons years ago. "Vance is testing you," he murmured, watching for weaknesses. I noticed. She focused on the music, on his lead. Why does he care? Because Melisande is his path to power. If she becomes Duchess, he becomes invaluable. If she fails... He turned her beneath his arm. He doesn't like to fail. Neither do I. Something warmed in his expression. No, I don't suppose you do. The dance ended, and Seren was breathless from more than exertion. Corvin released her hand slowly, his fingers lingering for just a moment. "Walk with me," he said quietly. "I need air." They slipped through glass doors onto a terrace overlooking darkened gardens. The night was cool, stars emerging through breaking clouds. Seren breathed deeply, grateful for escape from the watching eyes. "You're doing well," Corvin said. "Better than I expected. Did you expect me to fail? I expected you to be overwhelmed. This world isn't kind to outsiders." "Your world." "Yes." He leaned against the stone balustrade, his profile sharp against the sky. "A world I never asked for, but can't escape." "Do you want to escape?" He was silent for a long moment. Sometimes, when the weight of it presses too heavily, when every decision affects hundreds of people and every mistake echoes for generations. That sounds lonely. It is. He turned to look at her, though less so tonight. The air between them shifted, charged with something Seren didn't dare name. She should step back. Should remember this was performance. Should... There you are. Melisandre's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She emerged onto the terrace with Lord Vance trailing behind, her expression sweet as poison. How romantic. Moonlight and secrets. She moved to Corvin's side, her hand brushing his arm. "I do hope we're not interrupting." "Not at all." Corvin's warmth vanished, replaced by ice. Miss Lockwood was feeling faint. The dancing was rather vigorous. Poor dear. Melisandre's sympathy was paper-thin. Perhaps she should rest. These events can be so taxing for those unaccustomed to society. "I'm quite recovered, thank you." Seren smiled. "The night air works wonders. How fortunate." Melisandre turned to Corvin, dismissing Seren entirely. "Your grandmother wishes to speak with you. Something about tomorrow's arrangements." It was a lie. Seren could see it in the calculated gleam of her eyes. But Corvin couldn't refuse, without being openly rude. "Of course." He bowed stiffly to Seren. "Miss Lockwood, thank you for the evening air." He left, and Seren was alone with Melisandre and Lord Vance. "Such a charming performance," Melisandre said softly, all pretense of sweetness gone. The mysterious stranger who captured the Duke's attention. It's almost convincing. I wasn't aware convincing was necessary. Everything is necessary, Miss Lockwood. Every gesture, every word, every carefully crafted appearance. Melisandre stepped closer. "I've spent years building my position, years cultivating connections, learning secrets, becoming indispensable. Do you really think a soggy governess who stumbled to the wrong door can compete with that? I'm not competing with anything. Aren't you?" Melisandre's laugh was soft as silk and sharp as glass. "Let me be clear. Corvin will marry appropriately. He'll choose someone who strengthens his position, secures his legacy, and honors his responsibilities. Someone like me. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you've won, it ends when I decide it ends. Does His Grace know you've already planned his future for him?" Something dangerous flashed in Melisandre's eyes. "His Grace will learn to appreciate what I offer. They always do." She swept back inside, Lord Vance following with one last lingering look that made Seren's skin crawl. Alone on the terrace, Seren gripped the stone balustrade and tried to steady her breathing. Melisandre's threat echoed in her mind, each word a reminder of how precarious her position truly was. She was a governess, playing dress-up in a dead woman's gowns, pretending to belong in a world that would swallow her whole the moment she showed weakness. But she'd faced worse than society vipers. She'd survived poverty and loss, and the slow erosion of hope. She would survive this too. When she returned to the music room, she held her head high. Melisande watched from across the room, waiting for signs of retreat. Seren gave her none. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of cold eyes and colder words. Seren rose before dawn, on her borrowed nightgown damp with sweat, and spent the dark hours reading Corvin's journal by candlelight. His handwriting was elegant, but cramped, words pressed close together as if space itself was precious. The early entries were brief. Notes on books read, observations on estate matters, the occasional fragment of philosophy. But as the pages progressed, something changed. Father grows weaker. The doctors speak in careful euphemisms, but I see the truth they won't say. He's dying, and I'm supposed to care about crop rotations and tenant disputes, and the endless machinery of a dukedom I never wanted. Sabine doesn't see it yet. She still believes in hope. I can't bring myself to destroy that for her. The fever took him in the night. I was in London, Parliament, doing my duty while my father died alone, except for servants and a doctor who couldn't save him. I should have been here. I should have been here. Seren closed the journal, her eyes burning. The cold duke, the calculating aristocrat who used people as shields against unwanted marriages. That man had held his dying father's memory like a wound that wouldn't heal. She understood that kind of grief, the guilt of not being enough, not being present, not being able to change what couldn't be changed. Morning brought gray light and renewed determination. She dressed carefully, choosing a morning gown of soft cream that Sabine had deemed appropriate for informal occasions. When she descended to the breakfast room, she found Corvin already there, alone. Miss Lockwood. He rose briefly, his formality unchanged, despite the empty room. You're awake early. I couldn't sleep. Nor could I. He gestured to the seat beside him. The others won't appear for hours. Sabine rarely rises before 10, and the guests even later. Seren sat, acutely aware of the intimacy of sharing breakfast without chaperones. A servant appeared with tea and toast, then withdrew with practiced discretion. I read your journal, she said quietly. Corvin's hand stilled on his coffee cup. All of it? Enough. She met his eyes. I'm sorry about your father. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, something in his features softened. He would have liked you, he said finally. He appreciated people who spoke directly, who didn't hide behind performance. Is that why you gave me the journal? Partially. He set down his cup. And partially because Melisande will dig for information. She'll try to find inconsistencies in our story, evidence that we haven't truly been corresponding for months. If you know me, really know me, those inconsistencies will be harder to manufacture. So it was strategic. It was necessary, he paused. But that doesn't mean it wasn't also. He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Also what? Nothing. He stood abruptly. I have estate matters to attend to. Sabine will keep you occupied until this afternoon's garden party. Remember what I told you about Vance. He'll be watching. He left before she could respond, leaving Seren alone with cold toast and a dozen questions. The day passed in a blur of activity. Sabine appeared at noon, bright and cheerful, whisking Seren through final preparations for the garden party. There were last-minute fittings, discussions of strategy, warnings about which guests to engage and which to avoid. But through it all, Seren's mind kept returning to Corvin's unfinished sentence. But that doesn't mean it wasn't also. Also what? Personal? Important? Real? She pushed the questions away. This was performance, transaction, nothing more, except his journal sat in her pocket, its weight a constant reminder that nothing about this was simple. Late afternoon found her in her room, changed into the rose gown for the garden party, when a knock interrupted her thoughts. Enter. It was Nell, carrying a small velvet box. "From His Grace, miss. He said you might need this for the party." Seren opened the box. Inside lay a necklace, a delicate chain of gold supporting a single pendant of amber that glowed like captured sunlight. It was his mother's," Nell said softly. "He's never given it to anyone." Seren lifted the necklace, feeling its weight. It was beautiful, but more than that, it was meaningful. A piece of the mother he barely remembered, offered to a woman he'd known less than a week. She should refuse. Should return it with a polite note about maintaining appropriate boundaries. Instead, she clasped it around her neck. The amber rested against her collarbone, warm from its velvet prison. When she looked in the mirror, it seemed to catch the light differently, seemed to belong there in a way that frightened her. "Miss," Nell said hesitantly, "are you all right?" Seren touched the pendant. "I don't know." And that was the terrifying truth. She no longer knew what this was becoming, or what she wanted it to be. The garden party sprawled across Windmere's manicured grounds like a living painting. Pavilions of white silk billowed in the gentle breeze. Tables groaned with delicacies. Guests clustered on the lawn in their finest afternoon attire, their laughter carrying across the rose gardens. Seren moved through it all with Sabine at her side, nodding and smiling and playing her role with increasing confidence. The amber pendant rested warm against her skin, a constant reminder of the man who'd given it. She hadn't seen Corvin since breakfast. He was somewhere among the guests, performing his own role as gracious host. But she felt his attention like sunlight through clouds, aware of his gaze, even when she couldn't locate him. Miss Lockwood. Lord Vance materialized beside her, his smile too bright, his proximity too close. Sabine had been pulled away by Lady Ashworth moments before, leaving Seren momentarily alone. "Lord Vance?" She kept her voice pleasant. "Are you enjoying the party?" "Immensely. Though I confess I find the company more interesting than the refreshments." His eyes dropped to the amber pendant. "What a lovely necklace. It looks almost familiar." "Does it? The late Duchess wore something similar. I remember it from years ago, when I was still a boy visiting with my family." His smile sharpened. "How curious that you should be wearing it. His Grace has been very generous." "Has he?" Vance stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Generous is one word for it. Others might say reckless, impulsive, unlike himself." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "I'm sure you do." His hand brushed her elbow, a touch that felt like a threat. "My cousin has spent years positioning herself for this match. She doesn't take kindly to obstacles." "I'm not an obstacle." "Aren't you?" Vance's laugh was soft. "You're wearing the Duchess's pendant at a garden party, where every eligible family in the county is watching. You've been on the Duke's arm at every event. His grandmother may disapprove, but she hasn't sent you away." He leaned closer still. "That makes you very much an obstacle, Miss Lockwood. And obstacles tend to be removed." Before Seren could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Vance, I believe Lady Melisande was asking for you." Corvin appeared at Seren's side, his expression pleasant, but his eyes cold as winter ice. Vance straightened immediately, his threatening proximity replaced by polished courtesy. "Of course. I was just complimenting Miss Lockwood on her lovely necklace." He bowed. "Until later." He disappeared into the crowd, and Seren released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "What did he say to you?" Corvin's voice was low, urgent. Nothing I couldn't handle. That's not what I asked. She looked up at him, at the concern barely hidden beneath his controlled facade. He reminded me that your cousin doesn't appreciate obstacles, and that obstacles tend to be removed. Something dangerous flickered in Corvin's eyes. Did he threaten you? He warned me. There's a difference. Not to him. Corvin's hand found her elbow, his touch warm where Vance's had been cold. Stay close to Sabine for the rest of the afternoon. Don't be alone with either of them. I can protect myself. I know you can. His grip tightened briefly. But you shouldn't have to. Not here. Not because of me. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. This wasn't performance. This was real concern, real protectiveness, real feeling. Walk with me, he said quietly. There's something I want to show you. He led her away from the party, through a gate hidden by climbing roses, into a walled garden she hadn't known existed. Inside, the noise of guests faded to nothing. Flowers bloomed in wild profusion, untamed by the careful cultivation of the main grounds. My mother's garden, Corvin said. Father created it for her when they first married. After she died, he couldn't bear to tend it. It grew wild. It's beautiful. It's chaos. But his voice held affection rather than criticism. She loved chaos, apparently. Father said she was like a storm herself, so bright and fierce and impossible to predict. Seren touched a rose that had climbed halfway up the wall. You miss her. I miss the idea of her. I was 4 when she died. I remember warmth, laughter, the smell of roses. He moved to stand beside her. Sometimes I think the grief is worse for not having real memories, just impressions. Your father talked about her? Constantly. Everything reminded him of her. This garden, the library, the way light fell through certain windows. Corvin's voice roughened. He spent 20 years living with her ghost. I used to think it was romantic. Now, I think it was a kind of madness. Love often is. He turned to look at her, really look, with those pale eyes that seemed to see everything she tried to hide. You've loved someone. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. A boy in my village. We were young. He married someone with a better dowry. It's a common enough story. Did it break your heart? It bruised it. She met his gaze steadily. I learned that survival requires letting go of things you can't have. Wanting leads to suffering. Better to be practical. Is that what you're being now? Practical? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them named. I'm trying to be. And if I asked you to stop trying, her heart hammered against her ribs, that would be unwise. Wisdom has never been my strength. He stepped closer, and she could smell cedar and sandalwood, could feel the warmth radiating from him, despite the cool garden air. Ask me what I want, Seren. Her name on his lips was a revelation. Not Miss Lockwood. Seren. Well, what do you want? I want to stop pretending this is only strategy. His hand rose to touch the amber pendant, his fingers brushing her collarbone. I want to know if you feel what I feel. I want... Corvin! Sabine's voice shattered the moment. She appeared in the garden gate, flushed and breathless. You need to come. Grandmother and Lady Melisande are having some kind of confrontation in the drawing room. It's becoming a scene. Corvin's hand dropped. The warmth in his eyes cooled to ice. We'll continue this later, he said quietly. To Seren or to himself, she couldn't tell. He strode toward the house, leaving Seren alone in his mother's wild garden, with the echo of his almost confession ringing in her ears. I want to know if you feel what I feel. She did. God help her, she did. The confrontation in the drawing room had been contained by the time Seren arrived, but the aftermath hung in the air like smoke. The dowager sat rigid in her chair, her expression thunderous. Lady Melisande stood by the window, her composure cracked but not broken, and Corvin stood between them, his voice low and dangerous. "This discussion is finished." "It most certainly is not." The dowager's voice could have frozen fire. "You cannot possibly expect me to accept this arrangement. A fortnight's charade is one thing. What you're suggesting is quite another. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm informing you." "Informing me?" The dowager rose, her small frame vibrating with fury. "I am your grandmother. I held this family together, through your grandfather's death, through your mother's death, through your father's decline, and I have earned the right to be consulted, not informed. And I have earned the right to make my own choices." Corvin's voice hardened. "Father gave me that. He made me promise, on his deathbed, that I would not sacrifice my happiness for duty, that I would find someone who made me want to live, not just survive." Silence fell. Even Melisande seemed stunned by the revelation. "He was delirious," the dowager said finally. "Fever took his reason." He was clearer than he'd been in months. Corvin's voice cracked. He held my hand and begged me not to make his mistake, not to marry for advantage and spend decades regretting it. "Your father loved your mother. My father loved a ghost. He told me that himself." Corvin turned to face his grandmother fully. "He said he'd been dead for 20 years without realizing it. That loving and losing had broken something that never healed. He wanted better for me." "And you think Miss Lockwood is better?" Melisandre's voice cut through, sharp with disbelief. "A governess with no connections, no fortune, nothing to offer but a pretty face and convenient timing. I think Miss Lockwood is honest." Corvin didn't look at her. "I think she sees me, not my title. I think she challenges me in ways you never could. You've known her a week. I've known you my entire life, and you've never once asked what I wanted, only what I could provide." The words landed like blows. Melisandre's composure finally shattered, her beautiful face twisting with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret this, Corvin. You'll regret choosing some nobody over everything I could have given you." She swept from the room, nearly colliding with Seren in the doorway. Their eyes met for one frozen moment, hatred burning in Melisandre's gaze. Then she was gone, Lord Vance trailing behind her. The dowager sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her years. "You've made an enemy today," she said quietly. "Melisandre doesn't forget. She doesn't forgive. Then she and I finally have something in common." Corvin moved to his grandmother's side, his anger fading into something softer. "I'm sorry for shouting, but I won't be moved on this. You truly care for her? This isn't simply rebellion against my meddling." "It isn't rebellion." Corvin's voice gentled. "And yes, I care for her. More than I expected. More than I intended." The dowager's eyes moved to Seren, still frozen in the doorway. "Come here, child." Seren approached on unsteady legs, her mind reeling from what she'd witnessed. "My grandson has just declared his intentions in front of witnesses who will spread this story across London by week's end." The dowager studied her with those sharp, pale eyes. "I hope you understand what that means." I'm not sure I do." "It means the charade is over. Whatever this was meant to be, it's become something else entirely." The dowager rose, her dignity reassembled around her like armor. "I suggest you both consider very carefully what happens next." She left, and Seren and Corvin were alone. "I didn't mean for you to hear that," he said quietly. "Which part?" "Any of it." He moved closer. "I've handled this badly, from the beginning. You deserved honesty, and I gave you strategy. You deserved clarity. I don't. And I gave you games. What are you saying? I'm saying this stopped being pretense somewhere between the garden and this moment. He stood before her now, close enough to touch. I'm saying I don't want you to leave when the fortnight ends. I'm saying... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. In the garden, Seren whispered, you asked if I felt what you feel. Do you? The question hung between them, terrifying and inevitable. Yes. The word came out barely above a breath. I've been trying not to. I've been reminding myself that this is temporary, that I don't belong here, that wanting things beyond my reach only leads to pain. But yes, I feel it. Something broke open in his expression. Relief and fear and wonder all tangled together. Seren. We shouldn't. Even as she said it, she swayed toward him. This is madness. Your grandmother is right. Lady Melisande will never... I don't care about Melisande. His hands found her waist, drawing her closer. I don't care about any of them. I only care that you're here, that you're real, that for the first time in months, I feel like I'm actually alive. Corvin, tell me to stop. His forehead rested against hers. Tell me this is still just performance, and I'll step away. I'll maintain the fiction. I'll let you leave at the end of the fortnight with your references and your reputation intact. And if I don't tell you to stop, then I'm going to kiss you. His voice roughened. And I'm going to mean it. She should tell him to stop. Should remember who she was and who he was and the impossible gulf between them. Instead, she lifted her face to his. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined kisses would be. It was gentle and fierce at once. His mouth moved against hers with a tenderness that made her eyes burn. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, the world had shifted on its axis. I should let you go, he murmured against her lips. I should send you to Thornbury, with enough money to start a new life. I should stop being selfish. Is that what you want? What I want is impossible. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I want to introduce you to society as my intended. I want to watch my grandmother choke on her objections. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, in this house, in my life. That sounds like more than a fortnight. It sounds like forever. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I know I'm asking too much. I know the obstacles are enormous. But Seren, I haven't wanted anything this badly since before my father died. And I'm terrified of what that means. Why terrified? Because wanting things means losing them. His voice broke slightly. And I've lost too much already. She understood then, fully and completely. This wasn't a duke playing games with a convenient governess. This was a man who'd watched his father disappear into grief, who'd lost him before ever having the chance to say goodbye, who'd armored himself against feeling because feeling hurt too much. And somehow, impossibly, she'd slipped past that armor. We don't have to decide anything tonight, she said softly. We can take time, figure out what this is, what it could be. And tomorrow? The ball? Tomorrow we'll face it together. She kissed him again, soft and brief. Whatever comes. He held her for a long moment, his arms wrapped around her, like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Then a clock chimed somewhere in the house, breaking the spell. You should rest, he said reluctantly. Tomorrow will require all your strength. Will you be all right? I don't know. His smile was fragile but genuine. But for the first time in months, I want to find out. Morning brought disaster. Seren woke to Nell's frantic knocking, the girl's face pale with barely contained panic. Miss, you must come. The Dowager's receiving room. Something's happened. She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with buttons, her heart racing with nameless dread. The corridor seemed longer than usual, every step bringing her closer to whatever catastrophe awaited. The receiving room was crowded. The dowager sat in her usual chair, but her face was ashen. Sabine stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. Corvin paced before the fireplace, his expression murderous. And there, in the center of it all, stood Lady Melisande. She held a sheaf of papers in her perfectly manicured hand, a smile of triumph curving her lips. "Ah, Miss Lockwood, how convenient. We were just discussing you. What's going on?" Serene looked to Corvin, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. "It seems Lady Melisande has been conducting research," the dowager said, her voice carefully controlled. "Into your background, your family, your history." Serene's blood turned to ice. "I found it curious," Melisande said sweetly, "that no one had ever heard of the Lockwood family. No mentions in any registry, no connections to any known lineage. So I made inquiries. Melisande, this is enough." Corvin's voice was dangerous. "It's barely beginning." Melisande's smile sharpened. "Did you know, Your Grace, that Miss Lockwood's father wasn't simply a failed merchant? He was convicted of fraud, spent 2 years in debtor's prison. The family changed their name afterward to escape the stigma." The room tilted. Serene gripped the doorframe, her legs threatening to give way. "That's ancient history," Sabine protested. "What does it matter what her father—" "It matters because she lied." Melisande's eyes glittered with triumph. She presented herself as respectable, as suitable, when in truth she comes from disgrace. Her brother has debts in 3 counties. Her mother takes in washing to survive. That this woman, she gestured dismissively at Serene, is not a fallen gentlewoman seeking honest employment. She's a con artist seeking to trap a duke into marriage. That's not true. Serene's voice came out strangled. I never tried to trap anyone. I never asked for any of this. Didn't you? Melisande stepped closer. Stumbling to the door in a storm, collapsing so conveniently into his arms, wearing his mother's jewelry, accepting expensive gowns and gifts. It's a masterful performance, I'll admit. But it ends now. Melisande, Corvin's voice could have cut glass. Get out of my house. Your house. The dowager rose, her shock transforming into something harder. This is my house, Corvin, and Lady Melisande is my guest. She's attacking an innocent woman with gossip and speculation. She's presenting facts. The dowager's gaze moved to Serene. Is any of it true? Your father's conviction? The changed name? Serene felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. My father made a mistake. He trusted the wrong partner. He paid for it. And so did we all. But that doesn't make me a fraud or a con artist. It makes you unsuitable. The dowager's voice was cold. I warned you, Miss Lockwood. I told you from the beginning that you didn't belong here. Now you see why. Grandmother, Corvin started. Enough. The dowager raised her hand. This attachment ends now. Whatever you feel for this woman, it's based on deception. She is not who she presented herself to be. She's exactly who she presented herself to be. Corvin moved to Serene's side, his hand finding hers. A woman of modest circumstances doing her best to survive. The fact that her family's fall was more dramatic than we knew doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Melisande's smile was venomous. The Tun will never accept her now. The scandal will follow both of you forever. Is that really the legacy you want for the Blackwell name? Silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. Serene looked at Corvin, at the defiance in his eyes, at the way he held her hand like he'd never let go. And she made a decision. She's right. Corvin turned to her sharply. What? Lady Melisande is right. Serene pulled her hand free, ignoring the way it hurt. This was never going to work. I was foolish to believe otherwise. Serene, don't. I should never have stayed. I should have walked to Thornbury that first morning. Scandal be damned. She stepped back, putting distance between them. I'm not suitable, Corvin. Not because of my father's mistakes, but because of this. She gestured around the room. This world, these games. I don't belong here, and I never will. You belong with me. I belong with my family, her voice cracked. With people who don't need to investigate my background before deciding if I'm worthy of their company. Please. He reached for her, but she stepped back again. Don't do this. I'm doing us both a kindness. She blinked back tears. Goodbye, Your Grace. She turned and walked from the room, her legs carrying her, even as her heart shattered with every step. Behind her, she heard Corvin's voice, ragged with pain. Seren! But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because if she turned around, if she looked at him one more time, she'd never have the strength to leave. And leaving was the only thing she could do. Packing took less than an hour. Seren left the beautiful gowns, the silk gloves, the delicate slippers. She kept only the clothes she'd arrived in, now cleaned and mended by efficient hands. The amber pendant lay on the vanity, catching light she couldn't bear to look at. She'd written 2 letters. One to Sabine, thanking her for her kindness and asking her not to hate her for leaving. One to Corvin. The second letter had taken 6 attempts. Your Grace, I'm returning to my family. This arrangement has served its purpose, and I think we both know it's time to end before anyone gets hurt beyond repair. Thank you for your kindness, for your mother's garden, for the journal that showed me who you really are. Please don't try to find me. Let this be a clean break. Yours in gratitude, Seren Lockwood. She sealed it and left both letters on the writing desk. A carriage was arranged without fuss. The servant's eyes held sympathy but no judgment. Even Nell had hugged her fiercely, pressing a small package into her hands. From Lady Sabine, she whispered. She wanted you to have it. Seren didn't open it. Couldn't. Not yet. The journey home took 2 days. She watched the countryside change from rolling estates to modest farms to the cramped streets of her family's neighborhood. Each mile stripped away another layer of the fantasy she'd briefly inhabited. Home was exactly as she'd left it. Small, worn, smelling of bread and laundry soap. Her mother embraced her wordlessly, asking no questions. Her brother Phineas looked guilty and relieved in equal measure. Her father simply nodded from his chair by the fire, as if he'd known all along she'd return. It was never going to last, he said quietly. Best it ended before real damage was done. But real damage had been done. Seren felt it like a physical wound, raw and bleeding somewhere beneath her ribs. For 3 days, she tried to settle back into her old life. She helped with the mending. She visited the market. She read to her father in the evenings, though the words blurred through tears she refused to shed. And she avoided opening Sabine's package, which sat on her small bureau like an accusation. On the 4th day, someone knocked at the door. It wasn't Corvin. Some part of her had hoped, foolishly, that it would be. And instead, a nervous young footman stood on the step, bearing a letter sealed with unfamiliar wax. Not the Windmere crest, something else. From the Dowager Duchess, he said. She requests a reply. Seren opened the letter with trembling hands. Miss Lockwood, I have never been a woman who admits mistakes easily. Pride is a failing I inherited from my husband and passed to my grandson. But I am also not a woman who allows pride to excuse cruelty. What happened in my receiving room was cruel. Lady Melisande used information as a weapon, and I allowed it because it served my purposes. That was wrong. My grandson has been impossible since you left. He refuses to eat. He refuses to sleep. He refuses to speak to anyone except to demand that they help him find you. Lady Melisande departed in disgrace after Sabine discovered she'd bribed a servant for access to private correspondence. The truth of her machinations has come to light, and she is no longer welcome in polite society. None of this undoes the harm done to you, but perhaps it explains why I am writing. Come back, not for my sake, and not because I've suddenly decided you're suitable. Come back because my grandson loves you, and I have watched him grieve for 6 months without shedding a tear. Yesterday, I found him in his mother's garden, weeping like a child, holding an amber pendant and begging forgiveness from a woman who wasn't there to hear it. I don't know if what you feel for him is real or convenient. I don't know if you're capable of the strength this life requires, but I know that he believes you are. Now, and that belief is the first sign of life I've seen in him since his father died. Come back, Miss Lockwood. For him, if not for me. Give an old woman the chance to apologize properly, and give my grandson the chance to fight for something he wants. Augusta Blackwell, Dowager Duchess of Windermere. Saren read the letter 3 times. Then she opened Sabine's package. Inside lay Corvin's journal. A note was tucked into the front cover. He asked me to return this to you. He said he gave you his thoughts, and now they only belong with you. Please come back. He's breaking, and I don't know how to help him. Sabine Saren's hands shook as she opened the journal to the most recent entry. She's gone. I let her go. I should have fought harder. Should have defied them all. My grandmother, Melisande, society itself. Instead, I stood frozen while she walked away, and now the silence in this house is louder than any storm. Father was right. Love is worth the risk of loss. But he never told me what to do when the loss comes anyway. When you push away the only thing that made you want to live because you were too afraid to hold on. I've spent my whole life being afraid. Afraid of feeling. Afraid of wanting. Afraid of becoming like him. A ghost trapped in a house full of memories. But losing Saren isn't like losing mother or father. They were taken from me. She chose to leave, and I let her. That's the part I can't forgive. Not her leaving, but my letting her. Standing there like a coward while the best thing in my life walked out the door. If I could do it again, I'd fight. I'd tear down every obstacle, burn every bridge, destroy anyone who tried to keep us apart. But I can't do it again. She's gone, and I'm here, and the amber pendant is cold in my hand. I don't know how to survive this. I don't know if I want to. Saren closed the journal. Then she looked at her mother, who had been watching silently from the doorway. Go, her mother said softly. Whatever happened, whatever you're afraid of, go. It's impossible. His grandmother, society. Since when does impossibility stop you? Her mother crossed the room, taking Serene's face in her work-roughened hands. When your father lost everything, you were the one who found work. When Phineas's schemes failed, you were the one who kept us afloat. You've been surviving the impossible your whole life. This is different. How? Because if I go back and it doesn't work, and I'll lose more than employment. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I'll lose him, and I don't know if I can survive that. You can't survive it here either. Her mother wiped her tears gently. I've watched you these past days. You're already lost. At least if you go back, you have a chance of being found. Saren looked at the journal in her hands, at the letter from the Dowager, at the small room that had once felt like safety, but now felt like a prison. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of course you are. Her mother smiled. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act anyway. The footman was still waiting outside. Tell the Dowager Duchess, Saren said slowly. That I'll return to Windmere Hall tomorrow. His face lit with relief. Yes, miss. Right away, miss. As he hurried off, Serene stood in the doorway of her modest home and felt something shift inside her. She was going back, not as a governess, not as a temporary arrangement, not as a performance. She was going back to fight for the man she loved, and heaven help anyone who tried to stop her. Windmere Hall looked different in spring sunshine than it had in storm shadows. The facade gleamed cream and gold. Gardens burst with color. Even the ancient stones seemed to glow with warmth. But Seren barely noticed the beauty. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the carriage rolled up the drive. She'd rehearsed what she'd say 100 times during the journey, but now every carefully planned word had vanished. Sabine met her at the door, throwing herself into Seren's arms before she'd fully stepped down from the carriage. You came. Oh, thank God. Jean, you came. Sabine was laughing and crying simultaneously. He's been impossible. Absolutely impossible. I told him you'd come back. I told him, where is he? The library. He's barely left it since you went. Sabine pulled back, wiping her eyes. Grandmother's in her sitting room. She wants to speak with you first. I need to see Corvin. I know, but Sabine hesitated. She has something to tell you. Something important. Please, Seren, just a few minutes. Against every instinct, Serene allowed herself to be led to the dowager's sitting room. The old woman sat by the window, looking somehow diminished since their last encounter. Miss Lockwood. The dowager gestured to a chair. Please. Seren remained standing. Your letter said you wanted to apologize. I did. I do. The dowager's voice was carefully controlled. I allowed Lady Melisande to attack you because it served my purposes. I was wrong. My grandson's happiness should have mattered more than my prejudices. Should have? Does matter. Present tense. The dowager's gaze sharpened. I've spent the past week watching him fall apart, watching him retreat into himself the same way his father did after his mother died. And I realized something. What? That I'd rather have a happy grandson married to a governess than a miserable one married to a title. The dowager rose, her movement slower than Seren remembered. I'm not saying this will be easy. Society will talk. Some doors will close. But if you're strong enough, if you're determined enough, you can weather the storm. And you'll support us? I'll do better than support you. The dowager moved to her writing desk, retrieving a document. I've arranged a dowry. Nothing obscene, but enough to quiet the worst of the gossip. Enough to establish you as a woman of independent means. Seren stared at the document in shock. Why would you do this? Because my grandson loves you. Because you make him want to live. The dowager's voice softened. And because I was young once, I know what it's like to want something so badly it burns. Did you get what you wanted? No. The dowager smiled sadly. I'm married for duty. I've regretted it for 50 years. I won't watch my grandson make the same mistake. Seren took the document with trembling hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The dowager's eyes glinted with something like humor. You still have to convince him to stop being a dramatic idiot and actually speak to you. Is he that far gone? Worse, when he's convinced himself you're better off without him, that he'll only hurt you the way his father hurt himself. The dowager shook her head. Men and their noble suffering. Go fix him, Miss Lockwood, before he drives us all mad. Serene ran. Decorum be damned. She gathered her skirts and ran through the grand corridors of Windmere Hall until she reached the library doors. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate, simply pushed them open and stepped inside. Corvin stood by the window, his back to her. He'd lost weight. His hair was disheveled, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. I said I didn't want to be disturbed. Too bad. He spun, his eyes wide with shock. Seren, you wrote that you didn't know how to survive losing me. She moved toward him, heart pounding. Yeah, you wrote that you let me go because you were afraid. You read my journal. Sabine gave it to me, along with your grandmother's letter. My grandmother wrote you? He laughed bitterly. This family is determined to humiliate me. She wrote that you've been falling apart, that she found you in your mother's garden, weeping over an amber pendant. Seren stopped in front of him. Is that true? His jaw tightened. I was mourning. Everything I lost. Everyone I'm not lost. She reached up to cup his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm right here. I came back. You shouldn't have. But his hands found her waist, pulling her closer even as his words pushed her away. Everything Melisande said was true. Seren held his gaze. My father was convicted of fraud. My family changed our name. I grew up in shame and poverty and fear. But none of that changes who I am. None of it changes what I feel for you. What do you feel? I feel terrified. Her voice broke. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff and jumping could destroy me. But I also feel like staying on solid ground would be worse, because solid ground is a life without you. Seren, I love you. The words came out fierce and sure. I love your cold eyes, and your wounded heart, and your mother's garden, and your father's library. I love the way you hold yourself like armor and fall apart when no one's watching. I love that you gave me your thoughts because you wanted me to know you. Really know you. Even the broken parts? Especially the broken parts. She rose on her toes to press her forehead to his. We're both broken, Corvin. But maybe that's why we fit. His breath shuddered out. I don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make. For a long moment, he simply held her. Then his hands moved to cradle her face, and his eyes burned with an intensity that stole her breath. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be a duchess. You'll face scrutiny and judgment and expectations you can't imagine. I know. You'll have my grandmother's opinions and society's whispers and everything that comes with this title. I know. And you'll have me. His voice roughened, broken and terrified and completely, irrevocably in love with you. Then I'll have everything I want. He kissed her. Not gentle this time, desperate. His mouth claimed hers with all the fear and longing of the past weeks, and she answered with equal fervor. They clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, like they'd never let go again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his smile was radiant. Marry me. Is that a question? It's a desperate plea. He pressed his lips to her forehead. Marry me, Seren Lockwood. Make me someone worthy of the faith you've placed in me. Yes. Tears streamed down her face. 1,000 times. Yes. The library doors burst open. Sabine stood in the doorway, grinning from ear to ear. I knew it. I knew she'd fix you. She threw herself at both of them, pulling them into a crushing embrace. We have so much to plan. The announcement, the ceremony, Sabine. Corvin's voice was exasperated but fond. Perhaps give us a moment. No time for moments. The Thornfield Ball is tomorrow night. Perfect opportunity for a public announcement. Sabine's eyes sparkled with mischief. Can you imagine Lady Melisandre's face? I'd rather not think about her at all. But it will be so satisfying. Sabine pulled back, beaming at Seren. Welcome to the family. Officially this time. Seren laughed, overwhelmed and delirious with joy. Thank you. For everything. For the package. For believing. Thank yourself. Sabine squeezed her hand. You're the one who came back. Behind them, the dowager appeared in the doorway, Her expression was carefully neutral, but something softened in her eyes when she saw her grandson smile. "I assume you've worked things out. We're getting married, grandmother." "Yes, I rather gathered that from the shouting." The dowager moved into the room. "Miss Lockwood, I trust you received my letter." "I did. And your gift." "Gift?" Corvin looked between them. "What gift?" "Nothing of consequence," the dowager waved dismissively. "Simply ensuring my grandson's intended is appropriately established." "You gave her money?" "I gave her independence. There's a difference." The dowager's gaze softened as she looked at Seren. "Welcome to the family, Miss Lockwood. Try not to let us destroy you." It was, Seren realized, the closest thing to a blessing she was likely to receive. The Thornfield Ball was the event of the season. Every family of consequence had gathered in the glittering ballroom, their jewels competing with the candlelight, their whispers filling the air like music, and every eye watched the entrance. Seren stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered like stars. The amber pendant rested against her collarbone. Her hair was arranged with sapphires borrowed from the dowager herself. Corvin stood beside her, resplendent in formal evening wear, his hand warm and steady on her arm. "Ready?" he murmured. "No." She squeezed his arm. "But I'm doing it anyway." They descended together. The whispers erupted immediately. Seren caught fragments as they passed. Scandal. Governess. Melisandre's exposure. The dowager's surprise. But she kept her chin high and her smile serene, exactly as Sabine had taught her. At the bottom of the stairs, the host approached with barely concealed curiosity. "Your Grace, what an honor. And this must be—" "Miss Seren Lockwood," Corvin's voice carried across the room. "My intended." The whispers crescendoed. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Somewhere in the crowd, Seren heard Lady Melisandre's distinctive voice raised in outrage before being hushed by scandalized companions. But none of it mattered. Corvin led her onto the dance floor, drawing her into his arms as the orchestra struck up a waltz. "Everyone's staring," she whispered. "Let them." His eyes never left hers. "They'll be talking about this night for years. The Duke who chose love over duty. The governess who captured his heart. Is that what they'll say? That's what I'll say. Every time someone asks." He pulled her closer. "I'll tell them about a storm and a wrong door and a woman who fell into my life and refused to leave. I tried to leave, several times. And I was a fool to let you." He spun her beneath his arm. "A mistake I won't make again." The dance ended. Applause scattered through the crowd, some genuine, some polite, and some grudging. Corvin bowed, Seren curtsied, and they turned to face the watching masses. "Ladies and gentlemen," Corvin said, his voice ringing across the ballroom, "I have an announcement." Silence fell like snow. "Many of you have heard rumors about Miss Lockwood, about her background, her family, her circumstances." His gaze swept the room, daring anyone to speak. "I want to be clear about one thing. I don't care." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I don't care about her fortune or lack thereof. I don't care about her father's mistakes or her family's name. I care only that she is brave and kind and honest in a world that values none of those things." He turned to Seren, taking both her hands in his. "I care only that she makes me want to be a better man than I am. Miss Seren Lockwood has agreed to become my wife. Our engagement will be announced formally next week. But I wanted you all to hear it from me, here, now." His voice softened. "So there's no confusion about where my heart lies." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sabine began to clap. The dowager joined her, and then Lord Ashworth, and then the Hartley twins, and slowly, grudgingly, triumphantly, The entire ballroom erupted in applause. Corvin pulled Seren into his arms and kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone. Completely improper, utterly scandalous, and absolutely perfect. When they finally separated, Seren was laughing and crying at once. "You're mad," she whispered. "Probably." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I'm yours." 6 months later, Seren stood in the library at Windmere Hall, now officially hers, as much as it had been his father's. She was cataloging the collection, a project she'd undertaken to bring order to the glorious chaos of books accumulated over generations. It was quiet work, satisfying work, work that let her think. She pulled down a volume of poetry and found a letter tucked inside. The paper was old, the ink faded. She recognized the handwriting from Corvin's journal entries, his father's elegant script. "To whoever finds this letter, I hope it's my son. I hope he's found happiness. I hope he hasn't made my mistakes. I loved his mother with everything I had. When I lost her, I lost myself too. I spent 20 years mourning what was gone instead of cherishing what remained. If you're reading this, Corvin, I hope you've done better. I hope you've found someone who makes the grief worthwhile. I hope you've learned that love is not a burden we carry, but a gift we're given. Don't be afraid to want things. Don't let fear of loss keep you from living. Your mother would have wanted you to be happy. So do I. All my love, your father." Seren's vision blurred with tears. She was still standing there, letter in hand, when Corvin found her. "What's that?" He looked at the paper, then at her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She handed him the letter. "I found it tucked in the poetry section." She watched him read, watched emotions flicker across his face. Grief, wonder, peace. "He knew," Corvin said hoarsely. "Somehow, he knew I'd need to hear this. He knew his son." Corvin set down the letter carefully, then pulled her into his arms. "I love you," he said against her hair. "Have I told you that today?" "Only 7 times. Not nearly enough." He pulled back to look at her. Thank you." "For what?" "For knocking on the wrong door, for refusing to leave, for being exactly what I needed when I didn't know I needed anything at all." Seren laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "Thank you for not letting me leave, for giving me your journal, for being brave enough to choose love over duty." "I chose you," he corrected. Everything else followed. Outside the library windows, spring sunlight warmed the gardens. In his mother's wild garden, roses were beginning to bloom. And every year, on the anniversary of their wedding, Corvin and Seren returned to the great oak doors of Windmere Hall. They stood where she had once knocked in desperation, laughed at how far they'd come, and remembered how everything had begun with a wrong turn and a raging storm. It was their tradition, their reminder, their proof that sometimes the best things in life begin with a little bit of chaos. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that defies expectation, in characters who fight for happiness against impossible odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you'd like more romantic tales with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Until next time, keep believing in love that chooses courage over convenience. You make this community what it is.